has thrust that mission to the top of the agenda.
What took place is horrible, unthinkable, but we will win 100%.
That's the story. That's what, it's a new Middle East right now. America is back. That's the story, and the consequences are going to be immense.
After their meeting, the Pope gave Trump a medal featuring an olive branch. Yeah, when Trump received it, he said, does this mean I can eat for free at any Olive Garden? Or is this just here in Italy? Welcome.
You can eat anywhere free,
right?
If you'd like to. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are live from a rainy New York City on this Thursday.
That's right, but it is Thursday. It is tail end of the week, which means we can smell the weekend.
And things get a little bit better because we're able to do a cold open without us. When it's real serious, we open up talking. When things are starting to back off, we get to the investigation.
Which this is the first time this week I think we've been able to do that.
Yeah, and we're starting a little bit later. Meanwhile, we begin with a Fox News alert. The Manchester bomber's father and brother arrested, linked to terror networks worldwide.
But the hunt not over yet. Authorities intensifying the search for others, conducting massive overnight raids throughout England.
There are all kinds of details we're learning this morning. 8 people under arrest for actively helping this bomber at that concert. His brother allegedly knew about the attack. His father affiliated with ISIS groups in the past, according to reports.
That's right. And his brother apparently confessed to a Libyan militia that the two of them belong to ISIS. Now, here's the part that's going to bother a lot of people now that, and that's some of the leaked photographs that the UK is really steamed about, is the fact that apparently security services missed 5 opportunities to stop this guy.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we have more details on the bomb itself, video of him purchasing a backpack, and now why there's people still on the heightened alert, and how this could relate to other bombings. Meanwhile, Greg Palcott is live in Manchester, where a moment of silence for the victims was just held. Greg.
Very, very emotional, folks. Now you are hearing applause. The applause of the thousands of people who are gathered around this memorial to Flowers. They have waited for a minute, remembering the 22 dead, the 64 who are still in the hospital, many of them fighting for their lives after that dastardly attack Monday night on the concert here in Manchester. This, as the police very much are searching for who is behind and what is behind the attack. I'm going to pause for a moment. We're just hearing a few words. More applause. It's a very dramatic scene here. This is a city that has been racked by this violence, a city that has pulled together. The second biggest metropolis in the UK. I've lived in London for several years now, but the hometown feeling here is amazing. We can see it in the flowers, too, the remembrances of those victims. Again, as the police are looking very much into who was supporting these people overnight. 2 more arrests. There were raids also overnight and this morning. 8 now are under arrest, and it is believed there was a substantial network supporting 22-year-old Salman Abedi. This as we get chilling new video, surveillance video of him at a shopping center just a couple blocks away from where he did his committed his act. He was buying his backpack, which was then filled with explosives, and then shrapnel, which was which was resulting in such carnage all around him on that night. We're also hearing about his father and his brother in Libya in the last 18 hours, detained as well. His brother allegedly claiming he knew about the attack and that he knew that ISIS was involved. His father also associated with groups linked to Al-Qaeda. A lot to follow, but a lot of emotion here now as we hear singing, prayers, tears, and emotion for those who were killed in the attack in Manchester. Back to you.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Meanwhile, his dad also is quoted as saying, yeah, it's not us. We don't believe in killing innocents. We're not the ones who blow up ourselves. So he's saying that he is not behind it. The problem is his dad was linked to an Al-Qaeda group when Gaddafi was still there in Libya.
Think about what you and your family discuss. You talk about sports, you talk about politics, maybe homework that your kids had. In this family, they're talking about blowing people up and planning it together as a family, and this will not be the last time. There are other families out there doing the same thing, and that's what's scary.
Well, I mentioned a moment ago, before we went to Greg, security services apparently missed 5 opportunities to stop him, including some of the bomber's friends called one of those hotlines and said, hey, this guy just said being a suicide bomber was okay. And apparently his own family, there's another story out there, his own family was so worried about him, they warned security officials he was dangerous, and so they
His
worried...
own family?
His own family
took his
worried...
passport.
And what they did was they convinced him to come to Libya, where the family, the father and the mother, were living. Come to Libya. They confiscated his passport, and the only way he was able to leave Libya was because he said, you know what, Mom and Dad, I'm going to go to a pilgrimage at Mecca. And they said, oh, in that case, here's your passport. Next thing you know, he heads back home. But on the way, just 4 days ago, he stopped in Dusseldorf, Germany. People want to know what was going on in Dusseldorf.
But why the dad arrested? If dad's saying you're not part of terror and you're going to Mecca.
They're not believing.
Stories out there.
They're not believing him. Meanwhile, he was caught on video actually buying the backpack. However, investigators say they can't rule out the fact that it ended up being a vest. Number 2 is it could be a switch in his hand. They're not really sure about what it could have been a backup situation. But it looks like the people they've felt it the worst are the ring right around the bomber itself, and it killed at least 7 parents.
Wow. Well, meanwhile, President Trump is meeting with leaders of NATO. The fight against terror was already on the agenda. This just what happened on Monday in Manchester. It puts a new urgency on that topic. Here's the president.
When you see something like happened 2 days ago, you realize how important it is to win this fight. And we will win this fight. It's a horrible situation. What took place is horrible, unthinkable, but we will win 100%.
How many of these plots? Yeah, that's true. How many of these plots are getting blocked, and how much are they just getting aggressive after the explosion? We see the manhunts in France. We watched the manhunt in Boston. We see the manhunt now to wrap up, 6, 8, 10 people, and look at this family. Sooner or later, since our leaders aren't doing it, the American people, the British people, the French people, the Belgians are going to rise up and say, you got to be kidding me. We're going to start doing things politically correct because we care more about our families than you seem to.
Well, meanwhile, the United States, according to Charles Krauthammer, under the direction of this new president, has a new direction, and America is back.
The real story is not the Vatican. It's not even the Israeli trip. It's the realignment of American policy over Iran, getting this 50 Sunni nations lined up with Saudi Arabia behind us. This is a new day in the Middle East, and it's going to have reverberations for many years. That's the story. It's a new Middle East right now. America is back. That's the story, and the consequences are going to be immense.
And so one of the things the president is doing with the European ministers right now is he's trying to convince NATO, hey, you know what? There are only 5 countries in NATO that pay the 2% that they're supposed to be paying. Come on, you guys, help us out, because it's a worldwide war we're against regarding terrorism and all sorts of other bad stuff.
Yeah, because meanwhile, Italy's at 0.9% of their budget. Germany's about at the same. And when asked to increase their defense budget, they say, we don't really have anything to buy, so it'll just be a waste of money. You know why they don't have anything to buy? Because we bought it for ourselves in order to defend them. Do they miss the calculus that the American people are tired of running $500 billion annual deficits? We're now at $21 trillion because of things like that. There's got to be a more of a sincere attempt on the part of our allies to watch their own back.
That's definitely an important topic. The most for me and for many families out there is national security, and that's why what happened on Monday, it can't continue to happen. So it's very important for all these leaders that are part of NATO to listen to the president, listen to President Trump, and say, we're going to fight this, we're going to fight these terror cells, and we're going to get them. We're just going to annihilate them. You're
going to see some live pictures of the president during our telecast today as he continues his visit to Brussels before he heads off to Sicily.
Meanwhile, Jillian Milley is prepared to not only give us the news, but so much more.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later in the show, but good Thursday morning to you at home as well. Here's what you need to know. Hours before the polls open in the Montana special election, a GOP congressional candidate is charged with assault. Greg Gianforte defending himself after he's accused of body slamming a Guardian reporter. The candidate says that reporter tried to push a phone in his face before this happened.
We'll talk to you about that later.
Yeah, but there's not going to be time. I'm just curious if you have the
speak
right
with
now.
Shane, please.
But you don't.
Sick and tired of you guys. The last time that came in here, you did the same thing.
Ooh, quite a scene. Gianforte's campaign says the men both fell. 30% of the vote has already been cast in the special election to fill Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke's open House seat. Did fake Russian intelligence affect James Comey's investigation into Hillary Clinton? According to the Washington Post, the FBI got its hands on a document claiming former Attorney General Loretta Lynch assured the Clinton campaign she wouldn't let the investigation into her private email server get too far. In July, Comey announced the Clinton investigation was over. By August, the FBI concluded the document was fake, possibly meant to confuse the Bureau. Now, President Trump is widening his search to replace Comey at the FBI. Former Senator Joe Lieberman is no longer in the running. Airport security may be adding brand new rules for the next time you fly. According to a report, the new policy includes removing all electronics, from carry-on luggage if they're bigger than a cell phone. Food also included. Now, the goal is to declutter carry-on luggage to reduce manual checks when X-ray machines can't see through a crammed bag. The changes also come amid heightened fears terrorists could smuggle bombs on commercial planes. While world leaders search for solutions to the global terror crisis, former Secretary of State John Kerry has reemerged with his own idea: give young jihadists jobs?
Just infusing more weapons into the Gulf states is not going to solve the problem of a region that needs to create more than 60 million new jobs in the next decade alone. It is to provide these booming youth populations with a quality education, with skills for the modern world, with jobs that allow them to actually build a life.
The former secretary making the comments during a commencement speech yesterday at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government. Let's look at your headlines this morning, guys. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be talking about that one.
Right. A lot of these guys go to college. They have options, but they choose different options. And they got to be very smart to put together these bombs and make these plots. Jobs are not the issue solely. I know for some people, perhaps, but for the former Secretary of State to say that is pretty insulting.
I think we heard it from the last administration and the State Department, too. They need jobs.
Right.
We've heard that.
You just want a positive message when you hear from these commencement speakers.
No kidding.
The guy who runs Al-Qaeda is a doctor. He could be seeing patients right now, but he's in a cave plotting to kill us.
That slows him down. All right, 13 minutes after the top of the hour on this Thursday, coming up is a controversial way to stop people from becoming terrorists. Should we make immigrants assimilate, force them to become more American? Pete Hegseth says yes, and he's live in Minneapolis now.
And he's connected to a deadly terror attack. So why is this guy getting honored in a parade? Wait until you hear how that decision is being defended.
Fox News alert now. Disturbing new details emerging about the Manchester bomber and his family's suspected terror ties as we get brand new images you're taking in of Salman al-Bidi himself and his dad and two brothers who are both arrested. Remember, his parents were refugees from Libya. And our next guest says that explains a lot. Here to explain that is Weekend Fox and Friends co-host Pete Hegseth, the Fox News contributor, U.S. Army veteran. Pete, you think the problem is when people come to a Western country, they're not blending in?
Very much so. It's all about assimilation and allegiance. It doesn't mean they give up the cultures they came from and their family and the people that they know. It means when you come to the UK or to the United States, what has made these Western countries successful is that they coalesce around a set of ideas. And that requires things like language, learning the language, because it's the language of opportunity in that new land, and pledging allegiance to the flag and the country that you live in. In this particular instance, the parents came as refugees fleeing conflict. They were also Islamists who were fighting Gaddafi, by the way, so there was no vetting of them. But their son grew up with a divided allegiance, and that's the problem. When you have this divided allegiance, you live in a country, but you are not of it. You don't commit to it the way you would, and you're more easily seduced by radical ideas.
So what is society supposed to do when you're a new immigrant? It's pretty overwhelming to come and land and not really know anybody, not know the language, so government's trying to make it easier, and you think it's boomeranged. Where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you've got to make sure that when they come, you give them every opportunity to assimilate. And I'm going to pull up a Teddy Roosevelt quote. I've been doing some research on this. He gave a great quote in 1907, and he said this. He said, "We should insist that if the immigrant who comes here in good faith becomes an American or a Brit and assimilates himself to us, he shall be treated on an exact equality with everyone else. There can be no divided allegiance here." The key phrases there are good faith, coming in good faith, and then also no divided allegiance. You got to have extreme vetting to make sure people are coming in good faith, especially with refugees who aren't striving to come but are placed in a particular country. That's a big difference. And then divided allegiance, if there is an indication that there is no investment in the state they're in, these Western countries, we better get our arms around it, because the problem is only getting bigger.
Right.
And this refugee wave of migrants, Brian, that's the first generation. If they don't assimilate, these Syrian refugees, we're looking at a next generation that has divided allegiance and is easy for the picking when it comes to Islamists.
Right, and especially as they back off American history in the schools, you don't even have to know about the country that you're now getting opportunity to excel in. Pete, thanks so much.
You got it. Thank you.
All right, 10 minutes now before the bottom of the hour. Here's what's straight ahead. Did the Obama administration knowingly keep illegal, violent MS-13 gang members in the United States? You got a bombshell report breaking this morning on just that, and it's one of the most heroic military stories of our time. An Army staff sergeant battling hundreds of Taliban fighters for 12 hours, saving his men and not giving up. It earned him the Medal of Honor. Clint Romesha here with his incredible story and why he got that medal.
Here are some quick headlines for you. A bombshell report revealing the Obama administration allowed illegal and violent MS-13 gang members to come into the United States. According to Senator Ron Johnson, Customs and Border Protection documents show 16 teenagers caught crossing the border in 2014 admitted to being a part of that deadly gang. The new report comes as we learn the brutal MS-13 gang is turning Long Island, New York into a homicide hotbed. In just the past 16 months, the violent members have been linked to 38% of the murders in Suffolk County. And illegals in San Francisco will now get extra protection and services at their schools. The city school district unanimously passing a new policy that forbids school employees from cooperating with ICE. Steve?
Thanks, Ainsley. In 2013, Army Staff Sergeant Clinton Romesha earned the Medal of Honor for his role in the battle in Afghanistan. 5 years earlier, hundreds of Taliban fighters viciously attacked combat outpost Keating in Afghanistan for 12 hours. Romesha took action, helping take down the terrorists and bring his fellow soldiers to safety. Unfortunately, 8 Americans were killed in the battle. Clint details the harrowing tale in his book, Red Platoon, which has been out for a year. It is a bestseller and has just been re-released in paperback just in time for Memorial Day. And Clint Romesha joins us live right now from Florida. Clinton, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I know it's got to be tough for you to talk about, but let's take folks back to October of 2009. You're the commander at Outpost Keating in Afghanistan, and you've been sent there to dismantle it. Why?
Well, we had been stationed there for about 3 months. We were holding the area for the elections going on that year, and we'd finally gotten word because of the tactical location being basically having an outpost at the bottom of a valley. It was deemed pretty much indefensible and unuseful. So we were actually about to break down, but 2 weeks before that, the Taliban had different plans for us and hit us pretty hot and heavy that morning of October 3rd.
Tell us how it started.
Kicked off bright and early, 6 o'clock in the morning, and first shots came in. It was such a just wall of steel and RPGs and bullets fly in the air, and no matter where you were standing, you were an easy target as the enemy had the high ground all around us, shooting down upon us. And the reports from each defensive position immediately came in with just overwhelming, accurate enemy fire. And to try and resupply and gain fire superiority at first was almost an impossibility. And within the first hour, the enemy was able to breach our perimeter and was inside the wire with us. And for the next almost 13, 14 hours next, tried to push back and recover everything.
And you were desperately outnumbered.
They estimated we went up against a force of about 300 to 400 fighters against 52 Americans sitting in the bottom of that valley.
How did you do it?
You know, it was one of those things that you rely on your training, but more importantly, you know, you got your battle buddies to your left and right just doing their job. And, you know, as I look back on that day, I truly don't believe I did anything special. Just did my job like the guys to my left and right were doing. And it was really, truly a motivation of not hatred of the enemy trying to kill us, but a motivation of love for your fellow soldier to your left and right that pushed you forward to do what you knew they'd do for you.
Invariably, the action you took saved a number of American lives. Sadly, 8 Americans were killed in this particular battle. What do you want people to know about the men who died that day in that ravine?
You know, it was, as part of doing the book Red Platoon, that was a big motivation behind it, to help tell the story for those 8 men that are no longer alive today, to tell their own, to show them as people, as husbands, as sons, as fathers. Show them as the warriors they were, fighting for each other, fighting for, you know, so much more than just themselves, giving up everything and more than was ever asked of them so we could come and survive that horrible day. And with Memorial Day coming up, especially now, you know, to immortalize and remember them, because that's one of the biggest fears is forgetting what that sacrifice and heroism looks like in our history of what was laid before us to get us here today.
Surely. And I know you're out of the service, but you're still connected to the service. What are you doing?
You know, I'm still pretty busy with doing a lot of veterans outreach. Actually, just down here in Florida with the Sons of South Fork, we took a group of veterans out tarpon fishing for the last couple of days, which was truly amazing to reconnect and just continuing to move forward every day. Always having a goal, always trying to strive to do better.
Well, sir, thank you very much for your service. It is an honor to have you on the program. His book now out in paperback is called Red Platoon. Clint Romesha, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, it is 6:30 now here in New York City. He's connected to deadly terror attacks. So why is this guy getting honored in a parade? Wait until you hear how that decision is being defended on this Thursday. And Democrats are already pulling out the scare tactics to undermine President Trump's proposed budget.
Add it all up, the Trump budget is a comic book villain bad budget.
President Trump receiving a warm welcome from European Union presidents this morning in Europe.
He now heads to lunch with the French leader Emmanuel Macron just hours before attending his first NATO summit.
The 2 newest leaders in the Western world. Now let's go to Kevin Corke, who is live in Brussels and will be allowed to listen in with a cup to the wall. Is that true, Kevin?
You're right on the money, and I've got chocolate in one hand and a beer in the... I can't tell you that, but I can tell you this. It's great being here in Belgium. It's a huge day, as you point out, economic cooperation, security coordination, and obviously trade among the many topics we expect the president to be talking about in his conversations here today. And certainly we're also going to try to keep an ear about the Paris Climate Accord. I mean, that may come up, folks, and we've been talking about that a great deal. Also, NATO's effort in the anti-ISIS campaign, that, and of course, we'll be looking forward to a readout of that lunch with the French President Macron. Now, clearly, NATO is going to be the real dominant conversation piece here, right? The president has been very forceful, saying, look, nation members have to pay their fair share, folks, at least 2% of GDP by 2024. He's going to hear how they're going to try to get to that number. Right now, by the way, the U.S. is contributing about 4% of GDP, and the president feels like that is simply unfair. We hope to hear from the president soon, and if we do, of course, I promise I'll bring it to you first here on Fox. Back to you.
All right, Kevin Corke live in Brussels. Thank you very much. Charles Payne, the host of Making Money with Charles Payne on Fox Business, is joining us right now. And in the history of the Fox News channel, I don't know that anybody has ever shown up for a program who actually brought their lunchbox. We thought this was a prop that he was going to use, and as it turns out, this is your lunch.
That's my lunch, yeah. Well, they called me last minute because I'm filling in for Stuart Varney today, and I was on the road. I had to park next to there, and so I'm going to put it in.
Walked in, and here's your
I'm going to put it on the fridge after I hit.
It's a good way to save money. You're not going to go out
and
to a
lose
restaurant
weight.
and to lose weight.
By the way, tweet us. Tell us what you think is in that canister.
He doesn't even know. His wife prepares it for him. There's something at the bottom.
The main course is always on the bottom, though, and it's always great.
Okay. We're talking about
saving money. Do you need an explosive to blow it up?
I will never take it on the plane, that's for sure.
No kidding. All right, let's talk a little bit about the president's budget. He's taken a lot of flack because he, to make sure that we are deficit neutral within 10 years, we've got to grow at 3% a year. Right. And some people say that just is not going to happen.
Well, that is obviously it's possible. You know, the idea that we can't is ludicrous. In fact, this quarter we're growing at about 4%. You know, so why can't we sustain that? Particularly with the economic growth that I'm seeing in this economy already, that is so underreported. It's really a shame, but it's also perhaps done deliberately. You know, listen, there are certain adult choices that have to be made, and I also think the honest conversation about what happened in the last 8 years, when America, to a degree, we experimented with socialism. And it did not work. And now what we're saying is that, hey, how about going back and focusing on the people that drive this economy? Workers, small businesses, and perhaps not only rewarding them, but encouraging others to join them as well, because that's where you get 3%, 4%, 5% growth ultimately.
Charles, everyone who pays taxes, all of their taxes are going to be cut, which seems like a great plan. It's also going to cut $3.5 trillion in federal spending, boost military spending, and leave entitlements alone. People are quoting this as a home run, very Reaganite, most fiscally conservative budget since Reagan. That's from Chris Edwards with the Cato Institute.
I love the small government part of it, slashing some of these bloated departments. How do these Department of Education and HUD and all these things get a $40, $50 billion budget? It's mind-boggling. Yeah. I will say, though, that ultimately, we do need some sort of reform with Social Security and Medicare. People need to understand.
And the president doesn't want to touch that.
No,
and
no
Mick
politician
Mulvaney said he was told by the president not to.
Because it was a campaign promise, so we get that. But ultimately, to keep Social Security, to save it, you do have to reform. And I mean, honestly, if it was literally a lockbox and it had cash in it, if you open it up, it would just be nothing but
because we robbed from it.
We robbed it. It was never designed to work, and I think that's the premise we have to begin with. When it was instituted, first of all, we borrowed it from Germany. Bismarck wanted to fight off the wave of socialism, and so he did that as a compromise, and we adopted it. But when we took it, women were living to 60, and men were living to 57, 58. It was never designed to work, and now it could hurt us. So ultimately, we need to focus on that. But the idea of smaller government is something we all should embrace, and the idea of rewarding people for working. Somewhere along the line, the notion became that all money generated in this country belongs to government first and us second. They're not giving us the money back. These are taxes they shouldn't be taking from us in the first place.
Right, now we're getting you all wound up, and I apologize for that.
But it's only a month since I wrote that last check to the
Have a great lunch.
Will the Germans apologize to us for Bismarck's Social Security move, which we copied?
Yeah, we should have copied their vocational education system.
There you go. All right, Charles, thank you very much.
Appreciate
we'll be watching
it.
today at 9 in for Stu.
All right, let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some more headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
Most intriguing lunch pail I've ever seen. I know. The New York Daily News joining the NYPD commissioner, JetBlue, Coca-Cola, and more in marching away from next month's Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York City. The event celebrating Oscar Lopez Rivera, whose group claimed responsibility for more than 100 bombings across the U.S. But a New York City councilman tells Tucker Carlson Rivera is a freedom fighter.
You obviously don't follow this in any detail. You're glomming onto the guy because he's a fashionable communist, but he's also a terrorist.
Again, Nelson Mandela was viewed as a terrorist till 2008.
But this is, are you really comparing him to Nelson Mandela?
Rivera's sentence was commuted under President Obama after spending decades behind bars. A victory in the fight to fix the broken system at the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA accountability bill is one step closer to law after overcoming a major hurdle in the Senate, passing a committee vote. It now moves to the Senate floor. The bill would make it much easier for the VA Secretary, David Shulkin, to fire bad employees. Well, the Lone Star State is booming. New population estimates were just released by the Census Bureau, and 10 of the 15 fastest growing cities are in the South, and 4 of the top 5 are in Texas. They show that Conroe, Texas, north of Houston, was the fastest growing of them all, with a 7.9% increase from 2015 to 2016. That growth, 11 times that of the nation. So a little bit of good news coming out of Texas, and that's what your headlines.
I like that at the bottom of the screen it said Southern Comfort.
Yep.
Thanks, Jillian. All right, turning to extreme weather, a strong, severe system packed with several tornadoes twisting across the South and the upper Midwest. This incredible video of one of the tornadoes is out of Jeffersonville, Ohio.
The storm also brings high winds, heavy rain, and hail, leaving the path of destruction there. It's a vicious system now on the move.
Whoa. Janice Dean is tracking what's ahead. And Janice, as I look at the weather, not only is it raining here in New York City, it's raining across much of the eastern third of the country and back through the Midwest.
You got it. You did it. Back to you, Steve. I'm just kidding.
Tell us about how severe some of these storms could be today.
So the Southeast, we saw over a dozen reports of tornadoes yesterday, and that system is moving across the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. There are going to be delays and cancellations at the airport, so call ahead, check ahead. There are the reports, the tornadoes, over 150 reports of hail and damaging winds, and all of that is moving into the Mid-Atlantic, and our next system moving out of the Rockies, so we are going to track it. And then Memorial Day weekend, looks like it could be a wet one again across the eastern third, so we will certainly keep you posted. Back inside.
All right, Janice Dean, where it is raining here in New York City as Fleet Week starts officially. A lot of folks out on the street.
They can handle it. They're used to the open seas. Meanwhile, they fought for our freedoms. Now 2 Georgia vets have to fight to fly their flag.
Do you plan on taking it down?
When I'm dead.
The vets fighting back, here live next.
Excellent. And stunning new evidence reveals the Obama administration knowingly violated the U.S. Constitution of thousands of Americans for a number of years, and that could be just the beginning. Tip of the iceberg. Judge Napolitano has been talking about this for years. He is right.
That's all you talk about, Judge.
Seems that way. Analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, this has all been done in the guise of we're keeping an eye on foreign terrorists, but somehow all of America is fair game, it seems.
All right, so I'll give you an example of what happened. The NSA gets a warrant from the FISA court to listen to the phone calls for everybody in area code 201. That's a lot of people.
That's New Jersey.
Okay, and they hear a conversation, and Kilmeade's name is mentioned in the conversation. He doesn't live or have a phone in 201, so they start listening to him. And then in that conversation, Ainsley's name is mentioned. She doesn't live or work in 201. They start listening to her. These conversations were not authorized by the warrant. And this goes on and on and on.
And those are not people who are speaking to somebody overseas.
Correct. And this goes on and on and on. And it keeps growing exponentially into the tens of millions of people. The federal statute requires that this not happen, that the NSA create what's called minimization procedures, a fancy phrase for a computer program that will stop this from happening, that will prevent them from listening to people that are not authorized to be listening to. The NSA has its own court called the FISA court. It is unheard of for the FISA court, which grants 99+% of all NSA applications, to rebuke the NSA. Last month they rebuked the NSA. Last night, or the night before, the rebuke in a 100-page opinion, which I read for you, Brian, came out.
Wow, and it was a circuit organization, news organization, and a Freedom of Information Act that got all this information
they did a terrific job.
forward. So don't say, so people at home say, well, this can't be, this is not politics, this is fact. Now, in 2011, when this was passed or reauthorized, they promised to put fail-safes in there to change it and modernize it, and they never did it.
You're right, and they got caught. But this isn't just a couple of people. This is tens of millions. Now, some people will say,